My name is Bryan Thomas Webb. I was born November 29th, 1945. That was in St. Joseph's Hospital in Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay. My dad's parents were born in England, on the outskirts of the city of Manchester. Mother's parents were born in Rimouski in Quebec. My spouse's name is Joanne, and she was a Como. We got married in 1966, February 19th, so that's 48 years ago. We first met her at a movie at Nick Link, which is at that time was a new theater. Prior to that, the theater was in the town hall, the old town hall. So it was a brand new building at the time, and the movie was called The Blob. One of the first horror stories that we've ever seen. It got to be replayed many times over the years, and it just got more amusing every time. It was quite creative. Joanne and I have 3 children. Firstborn was Michelle, and it was on August 25th, 1966. And then Daryl Lynn was born on October the 23rd, 1969. And Brenda, she was born on June the 25th in 1971. We have one grandchild, and her name is Amy Richardson. So Michelle is presently married to Bruce Richardson, and they live in town here. And our middle daughter, Daryl Lynn, she lives out in Calgary. She's been out there for about 10 years now. And she's in the financial business, and she's traveled all through Ontario. Finally went off to Alberta, and she's really enjoying it out there. And our daughter Brenda is married to Rob Krause, and they live in town as well. Rob is a very creative type of person, and he does excellent work. And he's a great musician, got a lot of talent. They rebuilt an old home on Drummond Street. That was 24 years ago. That's when they got married. And just recently, he's rebuilt a home up at Walker's Lake, and they just moved in the last month. And both buildings that he renovated are just absolutely amazing, the results. Again, you've got a lot of talent. An occupation, well, I was a working man all my life. I started out when I was in 1958, and I started working on the railroad. And I was on a gang. It was called the Extra Gang at the time. And we started at 5 o'clock in the morning. Of course, you had to be there by 4, and we worked till 5 at night. So that was a long day, and we got $9 a day. So that was about 50 cents in the well, I guess you do the math, but it wasn't a lot of money, but for, at the time and the age that it was a lot of money. And that was a summer job, of course, because then I would return to school. Well, I did that type of work on the different types of gangs, from the steel gang to the rock gang to the section gangs, every summer. I would work a lot of the weekends and school holidays. For that went on for about 6.5 years. And I managed to graduate high school, and not being there too often, because I really enjoyed a lot of sports, and when I wasn't playing sports, I was working. Once I graduated though, and I had been working through the summer for CP Rail, I took a job August the 11th at Kimberly-Clark in Terrace Bay. I started out at the jack ladder where most people started, and from there I went into the wood room and progressed eventually through the entire mill. I was fortunate to work with a lot of people that taught me a lot of things. I went on to work virtually every operating job in the mill, and so I had very much opportunity to learn a great deal. Then I went into a management position. So I worked in the union for about 11 years, and then the remainder of the 36.5 years I worked in management. And when I left, I was basically in charge of the whole operation. And it was just a great experience. It was very challenging, especially through the expansion years. We expanded the mill in 1979, and it was total chaos at the time for about 3 to 4 years before we started to get things to come around. So we went from a very small mill with a couple of hundred people to over 1,200 during the expansion years. And training of new employees was a real challenge. Fortunately though, Kimberly-Clark had patience with us, and we went on to be a very profitable organization. Up until the year I retired, it was in 2000, and Kimberly-Clark was at that time wanted to divest of their pulp mills because of the pressure they were getting from Greenpeace and cutting of trees and so on and so forth, and the pollutions that were involved. Which, by the way, Kimberly-Clark has spent millions and millions of dollars improving their environmental impact, and it was well known and well published. Since the mill has taken some real downturns, unfortunately, where they went through a couple of different owners, and in the last 2 years, a group of the East Indians have purchased the mill, and they seem to have gotten it back on track. Their plans are the intent is to make a conversion to produce rayon, and rayon of course is used in clothing. And there's a huge population in India, so I think they're very smart business people. Volunteering, I was very busy doing a lot of things, and that included working with people and their advisors through problems in their lifestyles and that. And that was all really part of my job, so it wasn't much volunteering, but that took a lot of my time away from the job as well. And since we were retired, my wife Joanne does a lot of charity cooking, and there's a group of, there was 5 girls in the group now, and unfortunately 3 of them have passed away. And they've got 2 other new people that join them to continue the work. And I help them out every once in a while. When we have luncheons, for example, I'll help them prepare the food and carry things in and out. Another job that I don't especially enjoy, but is whenever there's a death in the community, we always feed the family. So we get to go over and meet the people, console them, and it's a really good thing to do. Not especially enjoyable. It is enjoyable to meet the people, but when there's a death, it's not nice. There's so many of them, and one of my favorite memories is the street hockey we used to play, and especially in the West End. My grandparents both lived in the West End, and and the families were all very large, and there wasn't a lot to do other than you would either be chopping wood or sawing wood or shoveling snow. Every day when we get an opportunity after you finished your chores, we'd all meet and play street hockey. There's guys I'll always remember: Norm Gusboon, Pat Hollander, John Hollander, Bobby McParland, Jimmy and Pat Dugan, Phil Murray, and that was a gang that Johnny Cosgrove at times, Terry Parody, because they were all within that area. So that street, as you can see, was pretty well full. And the good thing at that time, we had electricity in town, and it was relatively new. So we played under the streetlights for hours. and sometimes missed supper, and the parents weren't happy about that. My grandfather Webb was, I spent a lot of time with him because I was the oldest boy in the family, and my dad was the only child in the family. Whereas on the other side of my grandparents, the Fourniers, there was 11 children in that family. So when you went over to visit, there were so many people there all the time, you didn't get near as much attention as I got with my other grandparents. Anyway, my grandpa Webb was, he served with the Schreiber police detachment, and they operated out of the old town hall. In the basement there was a jail, so he brought me down there real early in my life. I was probably 3-4 years old, but I remember it very clearly, because you had to walk down these concrete steps, and it seemed to be a long ways down at that time. And there they were, 2 jail cells as you first come in the door. And he said to me, "You stay clear of the law, or that's where you're going to end up." And he put me in the jail cell. And he said, "How do you like that?" And I didn't like it. And I tried my best to stay clear of the law, believe me. And Grandpa used to take me on his walks around it in the evening, not all the time, but often. And he had some other chores to do besides serving with the police department. I don't remember this, but he was telling me he used to light the lamps just at dusk. And at this time, when I was walking with him, he'd go over and fire up the diesel generator that supplied electricity to town. And that was just across the street here where the food bank is now. That's where the generator was located. And that thing, no matter where you were in town, you could hear it. It was just so loud and so unreliable that you'd be in the middle of your parents are cooking supper. Of course, that time the electric stoves were just coming out. It was all wood stoves, but you'd lose the power and have to turn the coal oil lamps back on again. And we'd be playing hockey in the old arena, and the lights would go out, and everything's pitch black. The only thing you could see was the cracks in the roof where it let a little bit of light in, and there wasn't much light at nighttime either. But usually this would happen quite often early in the morning, because we'd get to go and play hockey before school, and that means we were up around 6 o'clock, and it was still dark at the time. Another memories I had when we were walking around town, everybody knew everybody because of a small community, even though it was a lot of people. So he could introduce you to people, and you got to learn that you know, the good people from the people that are not so good. There's also many characters out there. When he was finished his job, when he retired from the police department, he used to work as a janitor at the Bank of Montreal, which was where the old Chimo Club used to be, and it's now PJ's Cafe. Oh yes, in my dad came back from the war, and after that he would, again being the oldest boy in the family, I had 2 older sisters, Annette and Sharon. And then was the oldest boy. After me there was Bill and Bob, and then my sister Carol, and the youngest Pat. But again, before the younger ones were born, I spent a lot of time with my dad going around town, and he would introduce me to all his friends, and the majority of which had all served in the Second World War. And apparently the town was pretty well emptied out at that time, so they all went over for a common cause. There were some really unique characters. There was people like Willie the Whip, or Willie Perry. He was a paratrooper, and he got that nickname, I don't know how, but mostly through all the antics that he would perform, I'm sure. Joe Kakamo was another one. He was He was a paratrooper in the Second World War as well. And his parents ran a grocery store here for years and years, and along with his brothers. So that was quite a family business. There were so many other characters too. There was Capone. I don't know if you remember Capone or not. Leo Potvine. Do you remember George Fisher? All of those people had just unique characters, and you just don't see that anymore. Anyway, from all those experiences meeting those people, you learn how to judge characters. People that were sincere, honest, and sort out the people that got a lot of BS, quite frankly. For fun as a child, we played a lot of sports outside. Outside all the time. If you're inside, you're going to be working. And if you're outside, you still had chores to do. Digging in the garden all the time. And everybody had large gardens back then because everybody had large families, and it was great food because it was fresh. You go to the store now and the produce is, who knows how long it's been there. But you go out into your garden and pull the stuff out you want to eat, and there's no waste, and good for everybody. So the gardens kept you busy at certain times of the year. You know, in the spring when you had to dig them and plant them. Then there was some maintenance, of course, through the summer months, but that wasn't near as time consuming. And then in the fall and harvest time was very busy as well. Fun is fishing, lots of fishing. Every day after school, if you'd walked out to Lamont Lake or Rongies or Blind River, and on the weekends, because it was a lot further to go, we'd walk back on what they call the Stinking River, which is actually the Big Duck River, and go to Maud Lake or Catherine Lake. And my dad had a camp on Catherine Lake, which is 12 miles basically straight north of Schreiber. That log cabin was built as a trapper's cabin, and that was Bob Riley and Bryan Webster that had built it in 1933. And after the war, my dad, Leo Potvine, Bill Cox, Joe Cacamo took it over because it was abandoned at that time. So they fixed it all up, and it's been just a great place to go. Beautiful, the only camp on the lake. And I was fortunate enough to come on it as my dad, as his health was failing in the later years. In about 87, somewhere in there, mid-80s, he signed the camp over to me, because by this time his other friends had all passed away. I rebuilt the camp, and I put up a frame building, and we've got all the amenities you'd ever want there. It's as good as any house in town, and if not better. Joanne and I, my wife Joanne, spend about 2 to 3 months every winter back there. And once in a while we'll take a break and head down south. But we both really enjoy it. The other things we used to do when I was a child is ride bicycles. We'd spend so many hours riding bikes. And we would, the shops had closed down at that particular time, and we used to go into the shops and right around where they used to maintain all the steam engines, and the police would be chasing us around steady out of there, because it was still quite dangerous. But we had just great times playing tags on bicycles, and to tag each other you had to run into the next guy. So we had lots of little casualties there. And I mentioned earlier about street hockey. Well, I didn't mention anything about the outdoor rinks that we used to have. And especially up at the west end, behind Dugan's house, between there and Hallinan's. Hallinan's house was the one up on the hill. The winter rinks that the guys made every year. So we'd be playing on that every night. We had one single light bulb that we ran out. We ran some power from Dugan's house with a great long extension cord, and play for hours and hours there. And in the summertime, in that same field, which is quite large, we played football, soccer, baseball, you name it, with all of the same crew. So we built some great bonds together. One other little activity in the winter, and it was usually with Lauren and Geraldine Dugan, Lloyd McClellan, my sister Sharon, myself, and the odd time my younger brother Bill. Was when we got real bored to death, we'd go up to the Skinner's Corner, which is right across from Golly's, the funeral home, and that's right at the junction of Maine and Scotia, and it leads up. We used to stand at the stop sign, wait for a car to come along, and when they stopped, we'd jump on and latch onto his bumper. Well, there was only room for about 4 people, so we had to take turns. But we always watched to see which way they signaled, because our favorite place was to have us hang on to that bumper and see if we could make it as far as Thrill Hill. By that time, the vehicle was going quite fast, and usually we'd lose 2 or 3 people along the way. But it was just a great time. And that's something, of course, we never told our parents about. Oh, well, pretty dramatically. I'd say one of the things is the size of the families. Every family, I would say, had about at least 6. And there was from 6 to 11 children in most of the families. For example, on my mother's side, the Fernier side, there was 13 children in that family. Each one of them eventually had from 7 to 10 children, so as you can tell, the community was quite full. And nowadays you're just starting to see it come back a little bit. As I walk around town, and as you know, the place can be absolutely empty, and some of the days are just nobody and nothing out there. So it can be quite disturbing. Back then there were just so many activities going on, and there was people outdoors all the time, and I really miss that. In a medical field, there was a lot learned from the 2 terrible wars that we've had, and there was a lot of sort of field work or experimentation or treatment of bad burns and such, that it led to great progress in the medical field. And one example of that is the plastic surgery, because of the horrendous burns that took place from either shelling or heavy shelling, or in the aircraft, for example, that would burn up and create some terrible wounds. So there's been a lot of progress in treatment. Still have a long ways to go. We've had some unfortunate things that I got to talk about the government every once in a while, because I know we live in one of the best countries of the whole world, and we're fortunate. We've traveled many places, Joanna and I, throughout the world, and this is the best country to live in. It could be that much better if the government would get their act together. There's just so much potential there, just absolutely amazing. One of the fiascos was they were going to set up a medical system so that they could trace our histories from the day we were born till the day we pass away, and it would be all electronic. I'm not sure that I can quote the correct money of dollars. It's something like 20 million, I believe, which is, and after 10 years it would come up with nothing. That's just one example of the way the government wastes their money. Very unfortunate. Phones. When I was a child, we had phones that just came into effect, basically. And they had operators. And my oldest sister was an operator, Annette. You'd pick up the phone and you'd get an operator, and they'd ask you what number do you want to ring, and then they would do something and plug you into the other line. So that was pretty unique compared to nowadays, right? Then we got dial phones, and that was quite a dramatic change. And then where are we now? We got cell phones everywhere, land phones everywhere. Communication is absolutely instant. Tremendous change from around the world as well. I remember going to the old town hall during the Korean War, and every Saturday they'd have a movie and they'd show the news. Well, the news coming out of the, what events were taking place during the war at that time would be anywhere from 3 to 6 months old. Today, of course, you turn the TV on, you go to your cell phone, you go on the internet, and you can find out anything, anywhere, at any time around the world. So, dramatic change, darn right. Not all for the good. One of the things that came along, and I would say we didn't get the first credit card, that's for sure. I think it was in the late 60s, somewhere around there, where they come up with credit cards. It made it way too easy for people to spend their money and start charging things up. Have it now and pay later. Without the education. Wasn't in the school system, and at home we were always taught, well, when you got cash, you better manage it properly. But when the credit cards come along, people said, well, I want it now, I'm not going to wait. Look at the debt we piled up. Look at the debt of the government. It's trillions of dollars. Where's it going to stop? Debt has to be paid off at some time. I've asked a lot of questions on the education system, and it's only been a number of probably 5 to 6 years where they started to educate the children in school about money, because the world is all about money. So you better learn to manage it. Hobbies, yes, I have lots, and I can't really call it work a hobby. But everything I do is work. I like to renovate. I like to help other people renovate. I've helped our son-in-laws renovate their homes more than once. I built a camp 12 miles back in the bush, and that was a lot of work, just hauling the material there. And at that time, my dad was still alive, my youngest brother, they helped me build it. And in 5 days, we went from digging in the ground to a frame building, which was really well planned, well executed. Proud of that. And since, well, the place has changed dramatically. I've added a large bedroom, large bathroom. That's virtually double the size of the camp. And a porch, and decks all the way around. And it's about, at the most, 35, 40 feet away from the water, overlooking the beach. Beautiful spot. Put in a cesspool, dug a well, so got all the comforts of home. Got a generator with a remote start on it, so rather spoiled. One of the stories, and there's a newspaper articles actually in the library here about it, and that was about what we always call the Grant Mines, and they were called something else at the time. But that's where the Grant boys were murdered. And I remember people telling me their versions about it. And one of the things Ken Davis was telling me, that they walked back there in the middle of winter, of course, when all this had taken place, and now it's coming to the spring thaw because you couldn't access it. And the fella hadn't been caught yet. Can't quite remember his name. He did eventually get caught early that summer, and he had been out in Calgary, and he signed a forged check, and that's how the police got onto him. Anyway, Ken Davis was telling me that he walked back there with a bunch of his friends, and just before the mine site, they came on a bear, and its den was just coming out of the den, so they got quite a surprise there. Shortly afterwards, there was the town cop was Harry Drackley, and one of the investigating officers from Toronto came up, and they made their way out there, and then they eventually used sticks and that to probe the ground, and they came up with the bodies. So that was quite shocking for everybody in a small town. It was one story of a murder. There was another that my grandfather was involved in. That fellow's name, if I recall, was Tom Ackleton, and he killed one of the Hoppa girls, and I don't recall her name. I was too young to know the person at that time. He eventually made his way down towards where Hoppa's farm was at that time, which is now Graham's property, Ted and Althea Graham. At that time, I do remember the garbage dump was off to the left of that when I was a child, and that field was all encased with a barbed wire fence. So this Harry Drackley and my grandfather Bill would trace this guy down to this field, this Tom Appleton, and he ran across the field and got to the other side of the fence. My grandfather and Harry jumped the fence and were chasing him over there, and he had a gun. So they were pretty brave to be doing that, and they were promptly chased back again. There was a big bull come running out at them and chased them back over the fence. Well, of course, now they were at a stalemate, but the fellow over there decided, well, I guess he was done for, and shot himself. And he shot himself in a very bad way that he suffered for 3 days before he died. They just couldn't treat him. There was no treatment method at the time. He told it with a great relish and a lot of humor. He thought it was funny because he could run faster than old Harry. So he thought the bull would get in before he could get in. John and I, as we mentioned earlier, we did a lot of fishing, and Blind River was one of our favorite, and the most favorite was going back on the Stinking River, back towards our camp. But during the weekdays, it was way too far, to go back to 12 miles. But we'd go back 5 or 6 anyway, and fish along the river. And we'd be there till dark, almost every night, and our parents were not happy about that. The odd time they'd come out looking for us because it'd be 10 or 10:30 at night, and not happy. However, this one night we're coming back, and I remember it was right around where there was a spring there, fed beautiful water that run into Cook's Lake, just off to the side of the shore, about a third of the way around the lake. And as we came around this corner, is a bit of a straight stretch, and it's open to the lake there, and the moon was shining off to the side, and the next thing you know, everything just lit right up. We stopped dead in our tracks, believe me. What the heck is going on here? I think we were 9 or 10 years old, something like that. So pretty young. And this bright light came towards us, believe it or not, landed between us, and went out. As I mentioned, it was pitch black other than moonlight, and we had no clue what it was. We never ran so fast all the way home. I kid you not. And we said, don't tell anybody, they're not going to believe it. I don't know what it was. And we didn't, for years, never told anybody. And finally figured out it must have been a shooting star. But to come that close, quite an experience.